At a glittering Hollywood gala, the crowd gasped as a young actress suddenly slapped Keanu Reeves in front of everyone. Instead of fighting back or walking away, Keanu's calm, unexpected response revealed a painful truth behind her anger. In a single stunning moment, he turned public humiliation into a powerful act of grace and redemption. Sometimes the loudest moments in life happen in a room full of people who are pretending everything is perfect. Sometimes the truth crashes straight through the spotlight, right when the cameras are rolling and the music is too elegant for real pain. The ballroom of the Lowe's Angels Harmony Gala glowed like it had been painted with gold. Crystal chandeliers threw warm light over tuxedos and designer dresses, over the clink of crystal glasses and soft laughter that sounded almost rehearsed. At the center of it all, moving quietly through the crowd like he was trying not to disturb anyone, was Keanu Reeves. He wore a simple black suit, not the flashiest one in the room by far, but somehow people's eyes followed him anyway. Every few steps, someone stopped him. A nervous young actor asking for advice, a makeup artist wanting a photo, a waiter who just wanted to say thank you for a generous tip from years ago. He listened to each of them like there was nowhere else he'd rather be. The gala itself was supposed to be about second chances. The charity was raising money for trauma survivors, funding therapy and creative programs for people trying to rebuild their lives after loss, violence, or addiction. The irony would only be clear later. For now, everyone smiled for the cameras. The host joked into the microphone. A famous singer rehearsed a ballad softly near the stage. Keanu stayed mostly at the edges, fingers wrapped around a glass of sparkling water, watching the crowd with eyes that looked older than his easy smile. Near the back of the room, half hidden behind a column wrapped in white roses, a young woman watched him. Her name was Alina Cruz, a rising actress whose face had just started appearing on billboards and streaming thumbnails. To everyone else, she was just another beautiful dress, another carefully done red lip. But inside, her chest felt like someone was twisting a knife. Her jaw was clenched so tight it hurt. Her manager's earlier warning still rang in her ears. Tonight is about networking. Smile. Do not make a scene. She nodded then, but now her eyes never left Keanu. Alina had grown up watching his movies on a second-hand TV in a tiny apartment where sirens never stopped. To her younger self, he was the gentle man who fought for the innocent, who got back up no matter how many times the world knocked him down. He was the quiet hero in the chaos. But tonight, every time the audience laughed at the host's little jokes about Keanu's humility and kindness, something inside her snapped a little more. She wrapped her fingers around the stem of her champagne flute until her knuckles turned white. Somewhere deep down, she knew she was not really angry at him. She was angry at the universe, at fate, at all the nights when nobody had come to save her or her family. But anger doesn't always care about accuracy. It just wants a target. On stage, the host's voice lifted, full of excitement. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guest of honor, a man whose career has defined resilience and whose heart has given so much quietly behind the scenes, Keanu Reeves. Applause exploded through the ballroom. Phone screens lit up like a sea of tiny stars as people raised them to record. Keanu winced almost invisibly at the noise, then smiled and walked toward the stage, giving small nods of thanks as he moved through the crowd. Alina's heart started pounding against her ribs. Each step he took felt like a drumbeat, closer and closer. A part of her wanted to run out of the building, to disappear into the cool night air before she did something she could never undo. Another part of her, darker, louder, whispered, "This is your moment. Make the world hear how unfair it is. Make him feel it." Her eyes burned with unshed tears. She set her half-full glass on a nearby table and wiped her palms on her dress, trying to steady her breath. From a distance, she probably looked calm. Inside, she was shattering. As Keanu passed the last table before the stage stairs, he felt a strange tension in the air, like the moment in an action scene right before everything explodes. Years of experience on sets, years of real-life chaos and grief, had made him sensitive to atmospheres like this. His steps slowed without him fully deciding to. His gaze swept over the faces near him. For a second, his eyes met Alina's. He saw something there that did not match the glittering room, raw hurt, and a kind of desperate courage. It knocked the breath out of him more than the bright camera flashes. Before he could look away, Alina stepped forward. The movement was small but decisive, like she was crossing a line drawn long ago. People around them turned, curious, some already lifting their phones higher, sensing drama the way sharks sense blood. She came to a stop right in front of him, close enough that he could see the tiny tremble in her lower lip. Security at the edges of the room had started moving, but they were still too far. The band played a soft background tune. Nobody had told them anything was wrong yet. "Mr. Reeves," she said, her voice low but sharp, carrying just enough for the nearest tables to hear. The use of Mr. sounded less like respect and more like a challenge. Keanu dipped his head slightly, an old habit of politeness. "Hi," he answered quietly. "It's good to meet yo." The slap came out of nowhere, and yet from a place that had been building for years. Her hand flew across his face with a crack that cut straight through the music and the chatter. Gasps shot through the room like a wave. A glass shattered somewhere in the background. The band stumbled on a chord and then fell into heavy silence. Phone cameras, already watching, caught every second. Keanu's head turned with the force of the blow, his hair falling forward. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath. Security surged closer now, chairs scraping, heels clacking against the polished floor. Elena stood frozen, her hands still raised, her chest rising and falling in rapid, shallow breaths. Shock flashed across her own face like she couldn't believe she had actually done it. Somewhere in the crowd, someone yelled, "Hey!" Another voice hissed, "Turn off the cameras!" But no one did. The whole glittering room, built on poise and control, had lost its mask. Slowly, Keanu straightened. A red mark was already blooming on his cheek, stark against the soft lights. The crowd waited for anger, for security to pin Elena's arms, for chaos to rip the night apart. But when Keanu finally looked at her, there was something in his eyes that didn't match what anyone expected. Not rage, not humiliation, something deeper, quieter, almost like recognition. Security reached for Elena's shoulders, and she flinched, ready for the worst, when Keanu lifted one hand gently, stopping them in their tracks. He opened his mouth to speak, his voice low and steady, and the entire room leaned in, not knowing that whatever came next would change more than just the rest of the evening. And then he said her name. The way he said her name didn't sound like a guess. It sounded like someone recognizing a ghost. The ballroom, still frozen in the echo of that slap, seemed to shrink around them. For a heartbeat, Elena forgot there were cameras, celebrities, and executives watching. It was just her and this man she thought she hated, standing under two bright lights with her hand still trembling in the air. Security hesitated, glancing between Keanu and the event organizers near the stage. The host shifted awkwardly, half rising from his chair, one hand pressed to his earpiece as producers whispered frantically into his headset. A woman from Keanu's team at the front table made a sharp slicing motion across her throat, the universal sign for "end this now," but he didn't even look in her direction. He kept his eyes on Elena, calm and strangely gentle. One palm turned slightly outward toward security in a quiet request for space. "Elena Cruz," he said, a little more clearly this time, like he wanted to be sure. A murmur went through the nearby tables. Some people recognized her name from streaming shows and late-night interviews. To them, it suddenly looked like a bizarre publicity stunt gone wrong. She swallowed hard, her throat dry. You don't know me," she whispered, but the words didn't come out as sharp as she wanted. They came out thin, shaky, like she was arguing with herself as much as with him. "I shouldn't," he answered softly, his voice low but steady enough for the nearby microphones to pick up. "But I do." His gaze flickered just for a second to the small scar near her left eyebrow, almost hidden under makeup. It pulled at something old in his memory. "We've never spoken, have we?" She shook her head once, stiffly. The truth was, she'd seen him before, far away on a rainy day, when she was too young to understand the weight of coffins and contracts. But that memory was buried so deep she'd spent years convincing herself it was imagined. Across the room, someone whispered, "Is this part of the show?" No one answered. The phones stayed up, little red recording lights blinking. The band members stood frozen, fingers resting on silent instruments. Keanu could feel the whole event hanging on a thread: sponsors, headlines, careers, reputations. The safe thing would be to laugh it off, let security handle it, disappear backstage. He felt that option like a door half open behind him. But in Elena's eyes, he saw something he recognized far too well. The wild, cornered grief of someone who had already lost too much. That door slammed shut inside him. "Please step back," one of the security guards said quietly to Alina, reaching for her elbow. She flinched and jerked away, her facade cracking. Keanu's voice cut through before anyone could grab her. "It's okay," he said, and this time there was a quiet authority in it that made even the guards pause. "She's not a threat, she's hurting." The word hurting landed in the air like a confession no one had asked for. People shifted in their seats, something in their faces softening for a moment before curiosity took over again. A flash of anger returned to Alina, sharp enough to stand on. "Don't you dare," she hissed under her breath, just loud enough for him to hear. "Don't you stand there and act like you're kind." The last word tasted bitter. Her eyes filled and she blinked hard, furious at the tears. Not here, not in front of them. She had promised herself if she ever confronted him, she'd be in control. But control had evaporated the second her palm met his cheek. Keanu studied her for a beat, his own heartbeat loud in his ears. Behind his calm expression, something heavy was shifting. Years of silence, guilt, and choices made in the name of keeping the peace. He remembered a hospital corridor that smelled of antiseptic and burned rubber. A woman sobbing into her hands. A little girl standing beside her in scuffed sneakers, staring at him with big, dark eyes that didn't understand why her world had changed overnight. Security had rushed him past them back then, whispering about liability and press. He had twisted around anyway, catching one last glimpse of that girl's face. He had never forgotten it. "Alina," he said again, and for the first time his voice held a trace of his own pain. "Your father was Miguel Cruz." It wasn't a question. It was a truth laid bare in the middle of a glittering lie of an evening. Her breath caught like she'd been punched. The air around them shifted. A few older stunt coordinators and crew members in the back row straightened in their seats at the name, exchanging looks of sudden recognition and discomfort. "How?" Her voice broke. She forced it back together. "How do you know my father's name?" The anger was still there, but it now carried something underneath it. Fear. Part of her had spent years building Keanu into a symbol, an untouchable poster on a childhood wall she'd torn down in her head 1,000 times. Hearing him say her father's name made him frighteningly real. Keanu glanced briefly at the nearest microphone, then back at her. "Because I've carried it with me for a very long time," he said. The room leaned in as if pulled by a thread. At the front, the host's smile had vanished completely. He looked between Alina and Keanu like he was watching a car heading toward the edge of a cliff in slow motion. "This isn't the place," one of the producers mouthed urgently from the wings, slicing his hand again in that desperate gesture. Keanu saw him. He understood the stakes. But he also saw Alina's shoulders starting to shake, her fury now at war with a terror that this was about to be turned into a spectacle and then forgotten. He took a half step closer, careful, leaving her room to move if she wanted to. Then, in a voice that somehow carried to every corner of the ballroom without needing to be loud, he said, "If you want me to leave, I'll walk out right now. If you want to hit me again, I won't let anyone stop you. But please, don't let this moment end with just a slap. Say what you came here to say." For the first time since she stepped forward, Alina looked genuinely unsure. Her eyes darted to the cameras, to the faces around them, to the luxury brand logos glittering on banners along the walls. This was not how she'd imagined it. In her mind, she had seen him exposed, humiliated, speechless under her rage. Instead, he was handing her something she had never been given by anyone connected to that night. Space to speak, space to accuse, space to hurt him with the truth that had been choking her for years. Her voice shook when it finally came. "My father died making you look heroic," she said, each word scraping her throat raw. "He died in a stunt that should never have been done for a scene they didn't even use in the final cut. And you," her voice rose, cracking, "you vanished. You let them put your face on posters, on billboards, while my mother was choosing between rent and a coffin. We lost everything, and the world calls you a hero." Gasps rippled through the room. Some of the older crew members looked down at their hands. A few people lowered their phones, shame pricking the edges of their curiosity. Keanu didn't flinch. The accusation was a wave crashing over him, but he had been standing on this particular shore for a long time. He let the silence after her words stretch, not trying to fill it with explanations or defenses. His jaw tightened once, almost imperceptibly. "You're right," he said at last, so quietly it forced everyone to listen harder. "About almost everything." He lifted his eyes not to the cameras but to the ceiling for a brief second, like he was gathering the courage to peel away the last layer. When he looked back at her, there was no movie star in his expression, no polished humility, just a man who had made choices that haunted him. Your father died on my film. He died doing a stunt I agreed to, and the world did call me a hero. He paused there, hands hanging loosely at his sides, the red print of her slap still clear against his skin. People watched, waiting for the usual script talk of tragic accidents, of unavoidable risks. Instead, his next words dropped into the silence like stones. But Alina, your father didn't just die on my movie. His eyes shone, not with the sheen of cameras, but with something rawer. Your father died because in that moment I was a coward. The word hit her harder than the slap had hit him. For a second, everything blurred, lights, faces, the glittering room tilting around her. Somewhere distant, she heard someone suck in a sharp breath, heard the faint buzz of a phone vibrating on a table. Her mind scrambled to make sense of what he'd just admitted, to fit it into the story she had told herself for so long. Before anyone could ask what he meant, he took one step closer and whispered, just loud enough for her, and every waiting microphone to catch. Your father saved my life.